It was a quiet evening in the small town of Willow Creek, the kind where the sun sets lazily behind the hills, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and breathe. Emily Thompson, a college student home for the summer, was driving back from her friend's house. Her route took her down Old Mill Road, a narrow, winding path infamous for its sharp turns and dense woods that loomed on either side. As she drove, her radio flickered with static before dying out completely. Sighing, she fiddled with the dial, but the stations were all silent. She glanced at her phone, no signal. It was then that she saw it, a figure standing by the roadside. Cloaked in shadows. It was a woman, dressed in an old-fashioned white gown, stained and tattered. Her head bowed so low that her hair veiled her face. Emily's first instinct was to stop and help, but something in her gut told her to keep driving. She pressed the gas, speeding past the figure, refusing to look in the rearview mirror. 100 yards later, her headlights flickered, and the car sputtered before coasting to a stop. Panic bubbled up as she tried the ignition repeatedly, but the engine refused to start. The woods were silent, oppressively so, as if holding its breath. Then she heard it, a soft, scraping sound, like bare feet shuffling over gravel. Emily's heart raced. She looked up, and her blood ran cold. The woman stood in front of her car, head still bowed, her body swaying gently as if blown by an invisible wind. Her face was hidden, but Emily could feel the woman's gaze boring into her. Her hands trembled as she hit the lock button. The car doors clicked, securing her inside, but the woman began to move, slowly dragging her feet along the gravel as she circled the car. Emily followed her movements, turning her head as the figure disappeared from view. A deafening silence followed. Emily barely breathed, straining to hear any sound. Then, a sharp tap came from the passenger side window. She jumped, turning to see the woman's face pressed against the glass. Her mouth twisted into a grotesque smile, lips cracking as they stretched unnaturally wide. Her eyes were hollow, empty voids that seemed to suck in the darkness around them. The woman's head tilted at an impossible angle, her neck bending with a sickening. The car lurched forward, and the figure vanished, as if she had never been there. Emily sped down the road, not daring to look back. Her heart raced, her breath shallow. She reached her house, stumbling out of the car and rushing inside, locking every door and window. That night, she lay in bed, eyes wide open, haunted by the hollow eyes and that terrible smile. Sleep never came. The next morning, Emily's parents found her car covered in long, thin scratches, spiraling around it as if someone had danced circles around the vehicle. Old Mill Road remained silent, but locals whispered of the woman who wandered its path, searching for those who dared to look back.